Welcome to Behind the Wines, a freshly bottled podcast about Australian wine, the wines we love, and the people behind them. My mission is simple. I want to get down into the cellar with sommeliers, stomp some grapes with winemakers, and have chats with our finest critics, growers, retailers, and chefs. Today's episode of Behind the Wines comes to you with a splash of creativity and a flash of inspiration, quite literally. Our guest, Bridget Mack, started her career behind the camera, working as a photographer and visual artist for over 15 years, before finding a new way to capture light and texture through wine. From the studio to vineyard, from image making to winemaking, she's carved out a place in the new wave of Australian producers who value expression, precision, and play. She's the founder of Werkstatt Wines, winner of the 2024 Young Gun of the Wine Best New Act, and a proud committee member of Femier Cru. So welcome to Behind the Wines, Bridget.
Thanks for having me.
You've spent 15 years working as a visual artist and photographer. What first drew you to the camera, and what eventually pulled you towards wine?
So I think my love for photography and art in general started off at a young age. I had a flair for doing anything that was quite visually related. Loved doing anything that involved working with my hands and having an outcome, something that I could show for it. Probably I realised that I was really into photography in high school, when I had the opportunity to go to a particular high school that was really focused on art in Carlton, and had an amazing photography teacher and a dark room, and it was very, very focused on learning photography from the ground up, and there wasn't really any digital involved. So that was, for me, a moment where that interest really took off, and I realised that this could be something that I wanted to do for a career at that point.
You did that for a long time. So what was it that kind of pulled you towards wine? Did you always have an interest in wine, or was it something?
Yeah, photography took me overseas. I was quite successful doing exhibitions, winning awards and grants and things like that. But the wine thing kind of came about at a juncture in my life when I had moved back from Berlin after being there as an artist, meeting my husband there and having a child. And at that point, I've never really been able to explain it that well, but something happened in my brain, something that sort of flicked, and I wasn't really getting the joy out of being an artist anymore, out of the scene. So at that point, I was in my sort of mid to late 20s, still pretty young. I feel like I have a lot to give to the world. What am I going to do with my life? Winemaking didn't come as the light bulb moment, I'm going to do that. It took a number of years to figure out what I wanted to do. I always loved drinking wine, had a joy in that. And as I said, a love for creating something with my hands. And when I was thinking about what I could do, that sort of came into it. And I thought, yeah, maybe winemaking was the thing that I wanted to do. And at that point, I was like, maybe I could do a vintage with a winemaker and see if I like it, dip my toe in the water. And it was around 2009 that I took that step and did my first vintage.
And how did you go about that? Did you have connections, or did you just did you research that this is how I'm going to do it, or was it a bit of serendipity in that?
I would say it's a bit of serendipity because I didn't have a lot of connections in that world at all. My parents love wine, and I think very lucky that I grew up in that family and went to lots of different wineries as a child. My parents were friends with a winemaker, Ray and Marie of Lethbridge, down in Bellarine Peninsula. They suggested that I contact Ray and ask Ray for a vintage position. So I contacted Ray and went in for an interview and got the job. So we have a lot of things in common, Ray and I. So it felt like a very lovely connection of personalities.
So when you began studying wine science in 2019, did you have a clear vision for your path, or did it evolve with each vintage?
Definitely wasn't a clear vision at that point because it was something I was very, very excited about and energised, having just finished a vintage at Lethbridge, and I just wanted to kind of jump into it head first. So the important thing for me was doing it properly, learning how to make wine properly, not just having a mentor and sort of like doing things and like making mistakes on the fly. I wanted to have a really strong science knowledge and background. So going and doing the Bachelor of Wine Science at Charles Sturt was hugely important for that very chemistry-based background. So I guess that was one thing that I really knew that I wanted to do. Apart from that, I just really was very excited by the whole opportunity of doing a new project, in a sense, not necessarily having any strong outcomes or any sort of final direction.
How did your first harvest experiences in Victoria and Tasmania shape your understanding of what kind of winemaker you wanted to be?
My experience with vineyards and wineries in Victoria, I think, gave me the excitement and the platform to figure out that I wanted to make wine. Still didn't quite know where I wanted to be at that point. A longer a longer job that I did at Sutton Grange with Melchester, it made me realise that I didn't want to make Shiraz. But I learnt a lot from Mel about other things, but particularly vineyard work and how to be a female in a male-dominated industry. But yeah, at that point, I was still, I guess in a sense, I felt like I was still floating. I was still really just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. It was with my vintage with Jim Chatto in Tasmania that things started to solidify a little bit. This was maybe 3 years into my journey. And at that point, his depth of knowledge and love for Pinot Noir really, I guess, rubbed off on me. And I kind of started just looking at one particular varietal quite seriously. And at that point, it was Pinot Noir. And I think it's a varietal I love and I make, even though people know me for Riesling. But yeah, that was definitely for me the point where I was kind of started honing in on what kind of winemaker I wanted to be and how to look at just one varietal and really sort of make it, nail it, and yeah, try and do the best with it.
I find it interesting that you wanted to stay away from Shiraz because, especially in this country, Shiraz is like iconic. Was it the process or was it the style itself or the grape? What was it that...
It wasn't the style itself. I love Shiraz, don't get me wrong. And we were making really beautiful Shiraz out there. I just could see the market changing or having changed and knew that if I was going to be successful and enjoy what I was doing and be able to sell wine, it wasn't going to be selling Shiraz. So yeah, I could kind of sort of foresee that people aren't really drinking a lot of Shiraz in Australia, and yeah, that it wasn't exciting me.
Yeah, it's great to hear you kind of before the bell curve, because in the end of the day, you can make the greatest wine, but wine is about sales, and I think the challenge today, certainly for winemakers and distributors, is understanding the market and how market trends, and and that's really difficult. Now I'm going to push you on this. It might be a bit hard, but just do your best. If you could describe your winemaking process as a photo, what would be in the frame?
I think it would be quite an abstract image. It's a hard one because a photograph captures a moment in time and it doesn't change, whereas my winemaking process changes year on year, day on day, depending on what is happening during vintage, what's happening, in the cellar at any other time. So I think it wouldn't be a photograph which is easy to look at. I think it would be dynamic. There would be maybe a lot of intersecting lines. A photograph, as beautiful as it is, it doesn't do anything different than what it's showing you. Whereas the winemaking process is always in flux. It's always changing. And I think, that's quite beautiful in its own sense. So yeah, it's quite a hard question to answer.
Yeah, well, that's why I was interested, because it could be the stock standard a picture of some grapes glistening with the background of thing, this is what I'm laughing. I can see you laughing, because I know the winemaking process is not, but that could be, or it could be just a bit of just mud and you're thinking, oh, and you're up to your neck in it,
Yeah,
So I was just interested in that.
I see what you're talking about now. Sorry, I went into something
I'm just actually harboring my own artistic in this, just thinking that, it's, because as you said, a photo is a moment in time, but it can evoke images, or it can evoke other things that are not captured in there as well. Or it could be a person with their hands up in the air, looking disheveled, and that could be the winemaking process. So I like the abstract, something, it could be like I don't know, Picasso or something like that in there.
Yeah, the winemaking process, I think if someone was to take a photo, the winemaking process, I could imagine like a collage or something quite layered. Yeah, it wouldn't be just a straight photo of an image in a cellar. There's definitely layers of time and lots of different things going on there.
Tell us about the name Werkstatt. Have I pronounced that correctly? It's a strong, distinctive word. What does it mean to you in your philosophy?
There's quite a few layers to that name. I mean, I tell most people, obviously it's a German word, it means workshop. My short version is that winemaking is never a solo endeavour, even though I'm here as the solo winemaker. I am a negociant, so my grapes are grown by growers. I have help in the cellar. I've had mentors in the past. There's always lots of different people behind that one bottle of wine. And I like that idea of referencing that and including that sort of workshop and that ethos of collaboration in the name. And that's kind of like the big reason why I chose that word. I like the look of the word. I really love the German language, and just the way it looks is quite pleasing to me. Also, with my branding and longer story behind my wine and my connection to art, I liked this. I guess it's an art movement from Vienna called the Wiener Werkstatt, and it was a movement which I guess was around in the early 1900s, so 1910 to 1919, before the Second World War. And it was a movement which was really quite open and liberating, particularly for women and people from diverse genders, and quite very, very forward-thinking for that time. And I liked this idea of sort of using that sort of art reference of this movement in my branding and the way that I sort of look at the Werkstatt and what I'm doing and how I want to move with it.
I can see there's lots of layers. You can read lots of layers into that name as well, from a studio to a workroom, the way the Germans operate small kind of businesses in that way, is that they have different mentalities as well. They're collaborative.
Yeah, like a workshop or Werkstatt can also be used as an artist atelier as well. So yeah, there's definitely that comes into the name. So I have a short version which I tell people when I have like 5 minutes, and then I've got the long version.
Well, I'm glad I like the long version, and I think it works perfectly for you. Your first Riesling came from Delatite, and then you shifted to Mount Gambier. What did those two sites teach you about your style and direction?
Yeah, so the Delatite Riesling came about as a sort of a happy coincidence. I was working at Lethbridge doing another vintage there, and I mentioned to Ray that I really, really wanted to make a wine. And he said, I can get you some Riesling from Delatite. And I'm like, great, perfect. So that's kind of how it all started, which seems like a little bit of a loose, crazy story, but yeah, it wasn't anything extravagant. So I made that wine, and it definitely taught me a lot of how to make Riesling I guess it wasn't in that off-dry style that I've been making from Mount Gambier, but in a really kind of something that bridges traditional Australian Riesling and something a little bit more the German-esque. It wasn't until I started getting fruit from Mount Gambier, which is much cooler climate, that I kind of started moving into that more sort of Moselle Cabernet style of Riesling because of the higher acid retention at that site. Yeah, so definitely the first Riesling from Delatite taught me the framework of how to make a good Riesling, Australian Riesling. But then moving into Mount Gambier, I've learnt how to stylistically approach the wine in this very German-esque way, obviously using Australian fruit.
Werkstatt is described as a progressive winemaking using the best of traditional methods. What does that balance look like in day-to-day running in the winery?
So the winery that I work from it's a shared space. It's a co-op space, pretty basic, share a forklift and press and a few other things, but I have my own barrels and tanks and things. Winemaking in there it's modern, but I don't have any like crazy lab equipment. You know, I'm able to test my temperature and baume and things like this during vintage, but beyond that, it's very like just using your senses to make the wine. And in fact, you know, a lot of people ask me about the Riesling and keeping this bit of residual sugar in there. And at that point of when I'm making that wine and deciding when to stop the fermentation at that residual sugar level that I'm happy with, it really is for me tasting that ferment every hour, seeing how it's changing and seeing how it's balanced with the acid. At a bigger winery, some people would probably have a FOS machine or some other machine that they can put the wine into and check the levels of the sweetness of the sugar. But for me, it's just organoleptic moment of knowing when I'm really happy with that wine and deciding to cut the ferment there.
So it sounds like the traditional aspect comes from part necessity and also your instincts.
That's right, yeah. Necessity being that I don't have enough money for all the whiz-bang equipment, but also I actually quite like it that way. It's really nice to be able to have a hands-on approach to the wine and not rely on too many expensive technological things in the lab more than what I actually need to make good wine.
And for some out there, this might sound intuitive, but what attracts you to cool climate fruit? And why Riesling as your leading act?
I'm attracted to cool climate fruit because it has nuanced characters. It's not, when you make wine from cool climate fruit, the wines are never like smack you in the face with alcohol or simple characteristics. They've always got a lot of different layers and things going on. So for me, cool climate fruit is superior in that sense. Riesling, why Riesling? When I had my time living in Germany as an artist, completely totally unrelated to wine, it was for me the first time I actually got to try German Riesling. Growing up in a family that only drinks Australian wine, no one was drinking any wine from overseas. So that opportunity to try that there and kind of have this moment of, wow, what is this nectar of the gods? This is amazing. And then that just always stayed in the back of my mind, just bouncing around, reverberating, and finally coming to winemaking. That kind of swayed me to want to really focus on Riesling and do what I'm doing. I think, Riesling really is reflective of the terroir that it's grown on, which it's very exciting because you have a glass of Riesling from Alsace and you can sort of tell straight away where it's from. You have a glass of Riesling from Moselle, again, and South Australia, Clare Valley. So, yeah, for me, that is like a beautiful thing to be able to show and express. So that was definitely something that I am excited by and, yeah, a reason why I love Riesling and really wanted to focus on it.
Perfect. Your wines are often described as bright, textural and full of energy. How do you build that liveliness in the glass?
I like to think that comes from a range of different places. Part of it comes from techniques in the cellar. I think majority comes from sight. Choosing to get fruit from Mount Gambier, where you've got coastal Southern Ocean influence, amazing retention of acid, that's always going to give you that brightness and the acidity, which, Riesling holds really well. In the cellar, I allow my juice to oxidize in the press tray and at that point before fermentation. And I think what that does is that it allows the layers and more complexity in the wine later on. It also allows compounds, any oxidizable compounds to be oxidized and earlier on, and then you have more longevity in the bottle. which is always a benefit for something like Riesling, which can age so well. And yeah, if you do that early on, then you have a wine which is more age-worthy later on. Energy in wine for me is definitely like something that comes from acid, and something that is just like balance, and a balance of acid and other components in the wine. That definitely comes from the site. Choices in the cellar are like obviously leaving residual sugar there. That's going to add the texture into the wine. Allowing some kind of skin contact, whether it's a cold soak or purely just the grapes being shipped from Mount Gambier to Geelong and that time period that they have on skin will give that bit of texture in the wine too, which is, I think, it's beautiful, and you see it a lot in European Rieslings, not so much in Australian Rieslings. And I think it's an important component in making the wines powerful and bright.
And so I was interested to hear before you were saying you were mindful in your winemaking process that the Rieslings have longevity. So do you have a preference? Because a lot of people, they like them young and fresh, and some people like it older, or do you like them for what they are, where they are in that moment of time?
Yeah, I don't have a preference. I love all kinds of Rieslings. I think a younger Riesling is going to give you a better story of its terroir and the place where it's from. So that's worth thinking about if you're going to drink young Riesling. Aged Rieslings, I think because of the secondary and tertiary characteristics, they start to lose that sense of place, but they're still a beautiful drink. Still something beautiful to consume. So yeah, I don't have a preference. I love all of it.
And when you say with your wines for longevity, what time span are you thinking?
Hard to say because I've only been making Rieslings for 4 years now.
You try and have them, they're fresh 10 or?
Yeah, I'd like to say that you could still drink them in 15 to 20 years. Given the high acid levels in the wines, they're going to sell really, really well.
So the takeout for me is for listeners to really buy a dozen and enjoy them over the journey.
Yeah, drink a couple now.
And then save some for a rainy day. So 2024 was a big year for you. Young Gun of the Wine Best New Act, and a feature in Max Allen's Top 20. How did it feel to have that kind of recognition, and particularly so early on in your career?
Oh, it felt great. It still feels great. I never set out in winemaking to win awards or do any of that. I just wanted to make really good wine that I love drinking myself. Is always a bit of a surprise and a happy moment when you get this recognition from peers in the industry. Definitely the Young Gun of Wine, I think it helped propel my brand and get it in front of more people. The thing that I really noticed that was good for was getting trade meetings, particularly in Sydney and other states. People started responding to my emails after that, which was great because then I could be in better restaurants and have my wine served at the places that I wanted to have it served. So that was, definitely beneficial in that way.
And what about in your inaugural Gewürztraminer, made Halliday's top 100 wines of 2025. What's the story behind that wine?
The Gewürztraminer is the first year I've worked with this fruit in 2025. So it's just been like a beautiful journey because I love Gewürztraminer. I love those really perfume characteristics. So getting that fruit from a grower up in King Valley was also a really lovely experience. The vineyard's just been taken over by the daughter of the family from her father. So she's really energetic and wants to try more sustainable practices in the vineyard because King Valley's never really been known for its sustainability. So that's really lovely to work with her on that. The fruit is just so glorious, so well looked after, handpicked. Obviously, it's a phylloxera region, so I couldn't bring the fruit back to my winery in Geelong. I had to get it pressed and cold settled up. So that's always, you're not actually sure quality-wise how that's going to work out, bringing that back to your own facility when someone else has done that for you. But everything worked out really, really nicely. And it's a beautiful wine made in I guess it's, for me, the wine has this very Alsatian style nose, all of those characteristics of Gewürztraminer, lychee, Turkish delight. But on the palate, it follows through a very food-friendly wine. It doesn't have that unctuousness that bogs down in a Gewürztraminer where you have one glass and you have to tap out because that's enough. So I think given that, it was a very approachable and exciting wine for Jenny Port, who reviewed it for Halliday. And she's very excited by the wine and put it up there in the top 100. So I was just kind of blown away by that. First year making the wine, first year with that fruit. So yeah, it was quite a good acknowledgement.
Yeah, so it's sort of heavy expectations moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, this is always the challenge when you get an award or something. You always feel the pressure to do better next year and people are watching you a little bit. So I think the most important thing is to not focus on that too much, even though it's very hard, but to just try your best at doing what you're doing and hope that the season is kind to you and everything goes all right in the cellar.
Yeah, I was going to say that given there's so many variables in the winemaking process, maybe you're trying to make it better, it might be a bit too hard on yourself. Sometimes just maintaining the quality or maintaining expectations, as what I've heard from talking to winemakers, they're happy to do if they can just meet that and then move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one thing that a winemaker told me, which it always just rattles around in my brain. They said, "You've never made your best wine. Your best wine is always yet to be made." So kind of I use that each vintage and I think, yeah, this is a good wine, but it's not my best. I'm always going to do better. So I am quite hard on myself in that way.
So, all right, Bridget, we've heard the story, the craft and the creativity. Now it's time for a little fun. This is half glass full. Quick fire questions, no overthinking, just what's in the glass and what's in the gut. Are you ready? First, wine memory.
It would have been a sparkling Shiraz at Christmas.
Photo exhibition or wine tasting? Where do you feel more at home?
Wine tasting.
Riesling or Gewürztraminer?
Riesling.
Alsace or Burgundy?
Burgundy.
Favourite photo you've ever taken?
It was a self-portrait.
Most artistic thing you've done in the winery?
Probably invited Eric Jensen to write the poem.
One wine region you're still dreaming of working in?
Fowls.
Funniest cellar moment?
It's funny now, only because it's in the past, but losing a ton of fruit on the floor.
That doesn't sound very funny to me. I'm glad you can laugh about it. What else can you do? You're probably crying at the time. If Werkstatt had a soundtrack, what is the opening track?
It's a bit of an obscure song by Sardar Bonaire. It's called More Women.
What's the favourite thing about being part of Femier Cru?
Putting on events and seeing them actually make a difference for people.
Dream artist collaboration? It could be alive or dead.
Philip Glass writing some music to my wine.
Nice. Finish this sentence. Behind the wines, I'm really just...
Someone who wants to make beautiful things.
And don't we all like beautiful things? Bridget, thank you so much for sharing your story. From the dark room to tasting room, your journey is proof that art can take many forms. Werkstatt wines continue to capture both the imagination and terroir, bright, alive and beautifully framed. For listeners, explore Werkstatt and Femier Cru online for upcoming releases, collaborations and events. And thanks again, Bridget, for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Brent.
And a special thanks goes to you, our listeners. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share with your family, friends, and fellow wine lovers. And don't forget to visit our website for exclusive offers and the special wine tastings at Leroy in Bay Street, Brighton, for those you'll not want to miss. And as always, a big thank you to Prue, Mark and Pierre for making this podcast possible, and an acknowledgement to the traditional custodians, the land of the Wurundjeri people, where this podcast is produced. So until next time, stay curious, drink well, and keep your glass half full. Cheers!